Okay, I'm excited to be here today for the kickoff of the Red Shirt Effect and our first Instagram Live, which is no longer live because of COVID and the effect that it has on the NBA schedule. But we're super excited to have Scott Morrison, who's assistant coach with the Boston Celtics, and certainly has ties to Thunder Bay. So, Scott, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Honored to be the first guest.
Yeah, you got big shoes to fill. Nobody's. So anyways, let's run through a bit of your background. Just let those who don't know you a bit about yourself. Small town boy, PEI. Maybe take us through a bit of those times and how that kind of shaped you.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in a small town called Morrell. It's hard to see. I have a picture of the town right there, or village as it's called. There was only 300 people in the area when I grew up, and you knew everybody by the first name, and it was kind of a nice, safe place to live as a kid. And I was lucky that my dad was involved in basketball coaching, and I think when I was 4 or 5, he got the head coaching job with the UPEI men's team, and that was basically how I grew up around that team. He had players from all over North America come through. I was the only child at home, but I got to have 12 big brothers every season, and then eventually reached my own goal as a kid, which was to play for my dad at UPEI, which I did for 5 years until 2000. And then kind of started my own coaching career. I started in Halifax at Dalhousie University with the women's team there, and caught my big break when a couple people turned down the Lakehead job in 2003, including some that are involved in this program. And I was lucky enough to get the nod from Mr. Warden to take over the men's team in 2003-04. And after 10 years there, we had some bumpy times to start, but turned things around and a pretty successful run my last 4 or 5 years. So from there, I got another big break to volunteer, basically a 35-year-old intern in the G League with the Celtics minor league team, the Maine Red Claws. And from there, those guys got to know me and kind of saw how hard I was working at a low-end position, even though I had a lot of experience in basketball. And when that job opened up the following year, they hired me as the head coach of the Maine Red Claws, which I did for 3 years, and that led me to the Celtics, where I have been now. This is my 4th season on the bench with Boston. So it's been kind of a long journey, but seems like it happened pretty fast, and just very fortunate to get a couple of big breaks and lucky breaks, and had some good players on my teams that made me look good at times.
Now, one question that comes to mind is, when you go home, do you have celebrity status? People wait for Scott Morrison to roll in town. You must people looking for your time when you go home.
So I haven't been home that much to PEI since I got with the Celtics, but after the bubble, the NBA bubble in this past fall, I went home for like 6 weeks, which is the longest I've been home maybe in, 15 years. And I kind of thought I'd be more of a celebrity, quote unquote. No one knew who the heck I was when I got there. Everyone that I grew up with was probably long gone, or I had a few buddies that were still there, to have a beer with, that would, spend more time making fun of me than anything else. So it's
keeping you humble, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a pretty humble guy overall.
Yeah,
but yeah, that was definitely a humbling experience, thinking that I would be a little bigger deal in PEI than I was. So I guess it's safe to go back, and I'll be able to avoid the paparazzi next summer when I head home.
Now I know you've got a growing family, young son Max. My big question for you, since I know you're a Yankee fan, are you raising him as a Red Sox fan, or are you able to raise him as a Yankee fan in Boston?
No, he definitely will have 2 choices. One will be to be a Yankees fan, and the other will be to not watch baseball at all. So we got him some Yankees gear, Celtics gear, and my brother-in-law is trying to make him a Habs fan, so he keeps sending all Canadian stuff. I'm not opposed to it. I don't really have a favorite hockey team, so if he wants to choose that team when he's old enough, that's fine with me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so we have a number of questions, sort of one theme that I had sent to you earlier that we'll talk about, and then some that have been submitted. So let's start with the theme question. Obviously with this pandemic and everything that's gone on, and I mean, every aspect of sport's been touched by, whether it's professional, high-end amateur, high school, whatever it might be. How do you suggest that young athletes and coaches stay motivated through this, and in terms of, motivation to train in general, some suggestions for those folks?
Yeah, it's been a tough time for everyone. It's obviously a little bit easier for the guys at our level in the NBA because the NBA is, really pushing the season forward and wants to make money. So they're putting lots of protocols on us to keep us safe. But at the same time, guys are able to kind of live their normal basketball routine. But for the kids that aren't as lucky to be in the NBA or professional sports yet, or maybe they're trying to get there down the road, they really have to be self-motivated. Which is hard for coaches to teach that. You have to get lucky and have kids around you or on your teams that are really driven to succeed. And if you have those guys, those type of people, you can help them, remotely and by sending links to video and clinics and stuff that's online, which we do here as well. I've sent lots of stuff to my players that I work with since last March, and kind of leave it with them. But if you put stuff in front of them, sometimes they're more likely to be motivated by themselves. The one story that I kind of tell people that ask me, a lot of people ask me, do the NBA players work hard, or do they want to be coached, or are they motivated to get better after they've, become rich and have reached this high level? And I really have to say the majority of them are very self-motivated, and the money is one thing. They all obviously want to make as much money as they can because that's their livelihood, but it really isn't a motivating factor for them. They want to be the best they can be. They want to outcompete other, basketball players that they play against. And the story I like to tell is really my first week with the Celtics. I just been called up from the Red Claws, and Coach Stevens, we were in Las Vegas for the NBA Summer League, which happens every summer. And Coach Stevens called me to his room to meet, and I thought I was in trouble or I did something wrong. Who knows? I know when Tom Morrison used to call me to the office at Lakehead, I knew I'd done something wrong. So I went down to his room, and he basically said, we signed Gordon Hayward to a free agent contract. He's going to be the first guy you work with. I want you to go out to California where he lives and work with him. And Gordon was just coming off an all-star season in the NBA, signed a max deal that day with Boston. And here I was, just a kid from PEI who was my first assignment as an NBA coach. So I was pretty intimidated and not really sure how to go about it. So on the way out there, I just decided that I would be a guy that would just, do whatever Gordon wanted. He'd gotten this far. I'll just stand back, rebound for him, just kind of stay out of the way. So the first day I met him and we had lunch, and on the way home from lunch, I told him basically just that. I said, hey, you've come a long way. I'm just a new coach. I'm just going to stay out of your way. You let me know what you want me to do. And he said, no, that's not going to work at all. Coach Stevens wouldn't have assigned you to me if he didn't trust you and if he couldn't make me better. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to make me a better player. I want you to be hard on me. I want you to coach me. And it's not about what I've done. It's about how you can help me get better. So that really opened my eyes that, hey, these guys are always trying to improve. Doesn't matter what level they reach. They're always hungry for more. And they understand that if they aren't fighting to get better, there's going to be 10, 15, 1,000 other guys trying to catch up to them and pass them and take their contract, take their minutes and stuff like that. So little stories like that, I think, help, keep people motivated. At the end of the day, you have to have some, value of self-motivation inside you. But, I think it's a coach's job to help just kind of remind people of things they can do or what other people are doing, maybe what someone they look up to is doing, and that helps them, maybe get that extra workout in that day that they're not feeling as energetic.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly. And I mean, I think, it's a great way for students to take responsibility for their own development, but also reach out to some of the coaches they've had. I'm sure if you've had a former player reach out to you, whether it was somebody who played with you at Lakehead or with the Red Claws, you'd be happy to point them in a direction, and hopefully the others, will see that situation play out.
No question. I think the common denominator with coaches is they want to help people. They want to help players. And there's nothing that makes a coach happier than a player coming up to them and asking them for help or specific advice, or, hey, can you find some video of this? And that just makes our job easier and more fulfilling. So I would encourage anyone to reach out to their current coach or their past coach, or someone they maybe want to play for down the road. And I'm sure that 9 times out of 10, they'll be very, very receptive to helping them out.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so getting into a couple more questions. So one of the questions we had are, what are coaches looking for in athletes when recruiting, and what skills beyond basketball do players need to develop to move from amateur to professional, or maybe it's just high school on to college type situation?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll speak from the college point of view first, the university side. When we were at Lakehead, we looked for a lot of things in recruiting, and obviously basketball talent and potential was one of them. Athleticism was one of them too, because that kind of tells you how high their ceiling is to improve. But that wasn't the deciding factor, especially when we started being more successful as a program. We really focused on kids who were self-motivated, stay out of trouble, good teammates, potential maybe to be good leaders down the road, and good students. Obviously, in post-secondary sports, you have to be able to stay eligible and pass your classes and not be a burden on the school from that standpoint. So those are all things that we look for, and we try to research, through talking to their coaches, their club coaches, their high school coaches, maybe people that played against them that we knew. So we did our research and stuff like that. Sometimes you can fake it, but at the end of the day, it's going to come out when you do get to your school that you're going to, and it will kind of determine whether you sink or swim, so to speak. I think coaches have a lot more patience for someone who's working hard, but maybe not as good at their sport yet, but working hard to improve and have those good intangibles that they like having around the team, versus someone who's a little better at basketball, but is not the best team player or hard worker, or is always getting into trouble off the court. So those things are all extremely important. And in the NBA or professional sports, they are still important. It's not maybe quite as integral if they pass a class, for example, but intelligence and stuff like that comes down to, can you learn the plays? Can you learn the scouts? And can you be counted on to be there on time and be professional in your workouts, stuff like that. So all those intangibles, while not the exact same as going from high school to university, it's very similar in terms of determining whether guys will sink or swim, not just based on their talent.
Yeah. So character really is a component to a winning formula for teams.
No question. I would say at every level, talent's good to have, but hard work and character with a little bit of talent always beats a more talented team that doesn't have those things.
Agreed, 100%. How do you get athletes to accept their roles, particularly stuff like less playing time or players or bench players who play less minutes and contribute in other ways?
Yeah, it's a real tough thing to do, question to answer. I think most players, pretty much all players, have some level of team motivation and some level of individual motivation. Obviously, the ones that have a higher level of team motivation are easier to get to accept a lesser role or a specific job they have to do where they may think, deep down they could do more. But for the betterment of the team, they're willing to take that lesser role and be happy and not disrupt things. The guys who are more individual motivated, while they have some level of team motivation, they're a little tougher to get to accept something that they think maybe is beneath them. So I think every player is motivated the same way in terms of, you got to figure out what they really want and what they're made up of, and then try and spin things in a way that they see it being beneficial to them. For example, in the pros, everyone wants to play all the minutes and take all the shots, but maybe you can convince a guy that if he takes a better role for the team and the team does better, his next contract will be a lot bigger, because owners want to pay guys that will help the team win at the end of the day at this level. So that's a good example. In college or university, you can kind of sell the younger players on having to learn and play a role, but as they improve and become more experienced, they will have that bigger role down the road that they desire. And that's a way to kind of get those guys in line. So you kind of have to figure out what players want, what their end goal is, and spin things in a way that is true, but also they can see how it's going to benefit them in the long run.
For sure. And I think there's sometimes, especially with high school aged athletes, there's a sense that the best player coming in at grade 9 is going to be the best player leaving high school. And I think one of the things we see as coaches and a challenge to kind of show students is that if you put in the work, you will develop, you will pass people. And sometimes you just have to be patient and work hard at it. So I agree. Okay. How do you develop leaders within your own team?
Yeah, that's a real tough question. And I wish I knew the answer because I couldn't tell you the number of people.
Recruit them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think majority of leaders are probably natural, and maybe it takes time for them to develop their own internal skills that they have, but they're kind of natural guys that or girls that aren't afraid of the moment. They aren't afraid to speak up. They aren't afraid to be a little bit different than everybody else. They aren't afraid to say something that might be unpopular if it, again, betters the team and betters the cause of trying to reach the goal they're going for. So I think you can try and develop leaders at younger ages. High school, college. Again, if you get a player in that's a freshman or really young, you can kind of pair them up with someone who you think is a good leader and hope that they end up mimicking their characteristics as they get older. At the pro level, it's tough. I think you see early on if people have the potential to be leaders, and you can try and bring it out of them. But at the end of the day, you can't really create it. I don't think. You got to just try and figure out who has the natural abilities, and then encourage them to use them in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking back at your time at Lakehead, were there some key leaders on your team in terms of players that made differences for your success when you were here?
Yeah, no question. And we had 3 or 4, but I'm just going to mention one for the sake of time, and that was a kid by the name of Yusri Salia. And Yusri was a undersized center out of Toronto, who right from the get-go in his recruiting process, he was very honest with me. He actually kind of pulled out of Lakehead as a high school senior to go to a junior college in Texas. But he told me that he would, if it didn't work out there, he would come back to Lakehead and it wouldn't have to re-recruit him. I never believed him for a second. And then sure enough, about 8 months later, he called me and said it didn't work out. He had gotten injured and he was ready to come back to Canada. When can we get it going at Lakehead? So that right there told me he was a stand-up kid, mature beyond his years, you could say. And as he got to Lakehead, it was very evident that even as a freshman that he was going to be the leader of the team. The other players, even the older players, respected him because of his honesty, his work ethic. He didn't crap around, we would say. And, that carried over his whole 5 years. So there's an example of a guy who was a natural leader and just needed to be given the platform to do so. And he was a big reason, along with some other guys too, that we were such a good team in those last 4 or 5 years I was at Lakehead.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a question about practice. Do you have thoughts on keeping practice fun and fresh? And what is the difference between a college or a university practice and a professional practice?
Well, the easy answer would be don't play defense in practice. That'd be the one way to keep it fun. That's not a very good way to win games. So I think for me, the best way to keep it fun is most players, they want to compete. So, the more like 1-on-0 drills you're doing or fundamental work you're doing, it becomes monotonous and I like this word, but a little bit boring to them. It's still important to do that stuff, in individual workouts and things. But I think when you get your team together, the more you can compete, even if it's in a shooting drill, compete, half the team against the others, and as much as possible play, live action where the guys are going at each other. Maybe they got to do a couple push-ups or something if they lose, and just to keep it more interesting and competitive. That's what the best players find fun. And I think the biggest difference between college and pro practice is the amount of time you have. And I'm just talking about basketball here, but I think the same probably would be said for all pro sports. When you're in university or college, you usually have, 4 or 5 days to prepare for every game. So you're really getting in depth with your scouting. You're on the court a lot longer. And when you get to the pro level, you basically have a game every second or third night. You don't have a lot of time to prepare for each game. So the players really have to become good at taking something from video and applying it when you don't have, 3 hours a week to actually practice that skill or that game plan for the competition. So a lot more playing, a lot less practicing. you have to find ways to improve other than just by being in practice. So film, weight room, treatment, stuff like that all come into play. And they're not on the court as much, but probably putting in more time overall.
Gotcha. The next question comes from a member of our media, Leith Dunnick, and his question is, with COVID and everything that's gone on, and we've seen the success of Canadian basketball, placing obviously, more students in American universities, more players in the pros, coaches in the pros. Do you see COVID impacting the number of players that maybe go south of the border, and might that impact the CIS and its basketball in terms of having more students staying home?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's going to have more of an immediate impact on the CIS just because there hasn't been as much of a season as the NCAA has had. Now, the NCAA has had some setbacks, and lots of teams have had to take 2 weeks off and take breaks and this and that for positive cases. But the general theme in the U.S., as everyone knows, is kind of push through this thing and try to keep things as normal as possible at the risk of a lot of people's health. So not necessarily, I'm not condoning that or saying that's the right thing to do, but as far as a long-term or short-term effect on sports, I think it's going to be felt more at the Canadian university level than it is at the American university level. But that said, for individual players, I think that if there's one thing that's always been consistent, is that if you're good enough, someone's going to find you. So if your goal is to play the NCAA or get a Division I scholarship in whatever sport that you play, just keep working, keep grinding it out, do whatever you can to improve during this tougher time. But trust that if you're good enough, with social media, with the internet, with how much technology we have now, someone's going to find you if you're good enough. So stay the course and keep working, and don't give up on your goals, I guess is what I would say.
For sure. So now, most of those questions came from people who submitted them, and I bribed them with drawing names for gift certificates. So I drew those 2 names ahead of time, so I'll announce them now, and that way people will have to watch our interview here. So Julie Beach, who's a teacher at St. Pat's, was one of the recipients, and then there's a student at Confederation College with the last name Kundrat, who will win the second one. So I'll make sure I notify them, but hopefully they'll watch and find out through the video. Moving on, Scott, I've got sort of 3, fun questions I want to throw at you in terms of getting to know you a little better. So the first one, I'm not sure if you got good movie history in mind. So if we were to do a movie about the life of Scott Morrison, what actor would you pick to play your role?
So I would probably pick, I've been told I look like Jeremy Piven quite a bit. Ari from Entourage. I'm not sure he's in great standing in society right now. I'm not sure. I haven't really followed his story. I think he got a little bit of heat back. So if he's not available, I'd probably go Matthew McConaughey just because I like him.
That's good. I was thinking Tom Hardy. I don't know why. I think it was the intensity. If he could, if he could lose the accent and pick up some PEI slang. But okay.
I'm a big Peaky Blinders fan. I'd be okay with that too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So here's a tough one. You are guaranteeing Lakehead a national championship, but that means you can never eat PEI lobster ever again. Would you do it?
Oh, I do it in a heartbeat. As long as I can eat as many oysters as I can handle, I'll substitute the oysters for the lobsters and take the ring for sure.
Oh, I lost you for a second, but I'm back. Okay, and then our last question is, fast forward a year or 2, or who knows when, and you got a head coaching job in the NBA, and you have to pick one former player to be on your roster as an assistant coach. Who would that be and why?
That's a tough one. I would probably pick my guy Ryan Thompson. And again, it's just like when I referenced Yusri as a great leader, we had a lot of other great leaders too. We had a lot of other guys I would choose from, but Ryan made the sacrifice to come to Maine for 2 seasons with me. He volunteered there much like I did, And I like to think that helped him on his way to coaching at Lakehead. But the reason I would really take him is I know he's really good with video, and he's a kind of guy that likes to kind of proactively go and study things in the basketball world, whether it be overseas or the NBA. And he's always coming to me with some sort of project that he had been working on, and I really value that. Self-motivation, like we talked about when it comes to coaching, because that's where you get your new ideas from as a coach, and you want to have assistants that are out there looking for the next new thing before 10 other teams in the NBA are doing it.
For sure. Super. Well, again, Scott, I mean, we're super happy to have had you on here. Our Red Shirt Effect project's just kind of hopefully taking off to try and engage coaches and student athletes to do the best they can in this sort of red shirt climate to train and get better. And hopefully the messages that you shared today will help them get on the right track and get busy over the next while, so that when we're back to sport after these COVID times, they'll be bigger, faster, stronger, and developed all those tools and really have a love for training, which we all know can make such a huge difference. So appreciate you coming on. It's been good chatting with you. Good luck the rest of the year, except for against the Raptors. Yeah. And hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
Yeah, no, like I said, I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully things are back to normal for next school year, but if I can be of any help, let me know. And please say hello to everybody in Thunder Bay, except for Sinjo and all the referees there.
All right, Scott. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
All right, Dave. Thanks, man.
Okay, bye-bye.